I run EthAum Partners, and I love what I do because I get to interact with hundreds of startups every year. And these startups are founded by some crazy, passionate founders who are extremely intelligent. So I get an opportunity to learn from these founders, to see how passionate they are about their industry and transforming their industry. Recently, I interacted with Abhijit and Ankitash back in June 2023. And I knew that pharma industry is not easy. It's extremely difficult because of the regulations, because of the approvals, because of complex research or years-long research that you have to put in any drug or therapy development. But I did not know that almost 90% of the drugs are failing from get-go. The industry is losing approximately $10 billion every year in launching new drugs. And that was a quite staggering revolution or information for me. And that's why when I looked into what Abhijit and Ankitash are building, I got really, really excited. And I think this is the reason why we should have more similar kind of discussions on innovations and digital transformations impacting or evolving the drug launch space. Today, we have a very diverse and fantastic panel with us to talk about all kinds of innovations and digital transformations in the drug launch space. I would request Abhijit, CEO of ConformanceX, to do a brief intro of the company, and then I would love to move on to the panelists and learn a bit more from them. Abhijit, please.
Hi, everyone. Greetings. I'm the co-founder for ConformanceX with Ankitash, and we have set up this company around August 2021. I have been in the pharma industry and pharma consultancy for over 30 years, worked across different functions, different geographies, even worked in the US, across Europe, AMAC. And one thing stayed with me, and I was surprised, that drug launches are the most exciting moment. We get excited, and then they fail, and the marketing budgets are pulled off. And then all of a sudden that brand goes off into kind of, undercover, and then you talk of a new brand. And it happens all the time. People don't talk about it. So this was the base, and that's where we kind of came together. We have a host of board of advisors. I'll introduce you when we start talking. And based on the global expert, that's how we got to BrandLaunchX. They all suggested that this was an area that you could address. And this is how we formed our team, and we have the platform now ready to go live. Thank you. I'd like to hand over back to Pankaj.
Thanks a lot, Abhijit. Really appreciate it. Jonathan, may I request you to do a brief intro, please?
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Talbot. I've been in the industry for just slightly longer than Abby, but not so much, so nearly 40 years. I've now gone into the consulting area of things. Previous to that, I've worked in the UK, came up through sales into marketing, worked in Germany for Bayer for 5 or so years, worked in Japan for a couple of years as well. And I've been involved in launching pharmaceutical brands most of my career. So I was involved with Bayer with some of their antibacterials, GSK with their HIV portfolio. I took then a break and joined IQVIA and worked in their launch excellence consulting group for 5 years or so. And then I moved back into pharmaceuticals with AstraZeneca and helped them launch some of their new brands, new therapy areas in diabetes.
Wow, fantastic, Jonathan. I'm sure that we are going to learn a lot from your insights today. So really appreciate your time. Christiana, may I request you to do an intro, please?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I, as Jonathan, am passionate for launches. I have been dedicating my entire career to specialty care, and more specifically, rare genetic diseases. I have led global launches and P&Ls of 3 billion euros. Launching is my extreme sport, right? You prepare, you have a team, and you enjoy while you're doing it. So I am definitely going to enjoy this panel today.
Fantastic. Really appreciate that, Christiana. Suzanne, may I request you to do an intro?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the intro. My name is Susan Whitehead. I've been in the industry a little bit less. We get some diversity here in years, so a little over 20 years. Been working both at early as well as late stage drug development at both large and small companies. And most recently, I was the president and chief operating officer at a startup called Pact Pharma. Currently in transition, working as a consultant, as well as running an investment company called Savvy Investments, but that's really focused more on the real estate side. Let's see, big companies, small companies. Yeah, I came up through chemist by training and came up through project program management. So I've done a lot of strategic planning and oversaw operations as the product moved through the drug development pipeline. So it's a pleasure to join the panel today.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Suzanne. Sudeep?
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Sudeep Chakraborty. I'm based out of Brussels, currently work for UCB, and I'm part of the Launch Excellence team and overall European operation for epilepsy and rare syndromes in Europe. I have a long career, like most of you. I worked in many geographies, Asia Pacific, then in Europe. I managed a P&L in Asia Pacific as well as in Europe. And yes, over the years, my experience of launching products has gone through significant amount of time, significant amount of change. And I can say that one of the big launches that I remember in my career was a diabetes drug in India. You can imagine the scale of it. And now we are launching a product for a very tiny, rare and orphan drug in Europe, 22 countries, population of maybe patient population of maybe less than 5,000 patients. So I've seen, you can say that the transition the industry has gone through and the ups and downs that has gone through. And that's why when this offer came up to discuss with this panel, I was excited. And I also wanted to share some of my thoughts, especially regarding what are the challenges that we face. Of course, I'll not go into the history, but more so, in the recent past and now, what's really pulling us back. Thank you very much. Let's have a very great experience of this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Sudeep. We are equally excited. Aina, may I request you, please?
Hi. Thank you. And good morning and good evening. My name is Ina Goldberg. I'm Senior Director of Health Sciences at Deep Intent, the company that focuses on distribution of treatment awareness information to physicians and patients via digital channels. So as such, my company and my team, we are a frequent participant of a component of the overall new drug launch process, and we kind of see it from the trenches. I'm generally someone who specialized in data analytics, data science, and spent some time in major payer prior to coming to pharmaceutical industry. So it's very interesting for me to kind of like see it from the other side as well and learn how different players in the value chain see the challenges. And prior to that, I used to work in financial services. So I came from financial services, analytics background and telecom as well. So again, very interesting to see how some of the learnings of the companies that have kind of like established operational excellence and really leveraged it and really optimized it can be. Some of them are translatable and some of them are not translatable, as you know. It's very really important to keep remembering that healthcare is a unique entity and it's very different from some of the industries that we see out there in terms of learnings as well. And really honored to be here.
Thank you, Ina. We are really honored to have all of you on the panel today, and it's fantastic to see how diverse this panel is. But yeah, Abhijit, we are talking to the experts today, and now it's your responsibility to ask some really interesting questions and get get some, great insights from them. So Abhijit, please start.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj. So to start the discussion, I'd like to ask Sudeep the first question, which is like, as a pharma leader, what are your biggest challenges and frustrations regarding the drug launch process?
Yeah, I mean, it's as we were discussing pre this session, it's so many deterrents are there at this point of time. So to me, there are 5 top points that I see are really impacting the launches. The first one is the patient journey. Now, post-COVID scenario, the patient journeys have completely changed. Okay, so that's the first point. And I think some of the panelists can add on to what I'm going to say. The second one is I do see it in Europe more so than maybe US or Japan. The HCP reluctance to prescribe new treatment remotely. Okay, and there are so many launches happening. Ever so many more launches happening in now, but there is a reluctance that I see that physicians are showing. The third one to me is the interaction that is happening between pharma companies and the HCPs. Both the quality of it and the quantity of it. There is a bit of a challenge there. I know that most of you may know the data, excepting maybe US, no other country has actually gone back to the pre-COVID level of interactions between HCPs and pharma companies. The only country that I see where it has kind of recovered is US. Then the fourth one probably is the biggest one to me, is the wider economic challenges, the cost of living, the different laws that are being introduced. We hear quite a bit about IRA in US, and then we have in Europe already EMA is trying to pick up bring in a law where they're saying that all new products have to be launched within 2 years. Otherwise, you will have to withdraw the launches from all 22 countries or something like that. And the fifth one to me is market access and funding. So it's again connected to the cost of living issues, the war in Ukraine, and all those factors put together. So these are the 5 points that I feel are really big deterrents for the launches that we are expecting to have in pharma market. One point that I want to just add here, that now we see more launches in specialty products, and I think Christiana has more experience on that. More launches in specialty products than in non-specialty segments. So more specialty products, more rare disease products, more orphan disease products. So which makes the things even more difficult for the product to be launched into the market. Yeah.
Anyone wants to add in any other point beyond what Sudeep has kind of mentioned?
Abby, could I just mention, because I think Sudeep's mentioned quite a lot of external factors there, and I think I fully agree with all of them. Understanding of market access, the HCPs kind of interactions post the pandemic, etc. My list, strangely, was all internal, not deliberately, but it just came out like that. So I thought maybe I could run through some of those and see where that resonates with the group as well. So the first thing was, and based on my kind of experience of seeing how product launches go, maybe in medium to large pharmaceutical companies, the first thing is that the pre-marketing is always really late and under-resourced. And that is partially because senior management backing and direction seems to be absent, usually until about 2 years before the launch, and then there's a bit of a mad panic. The third thing would be the kind of the brand launch experience, and the number of times I've seen kind of product managers or medical managers or regulatory guys or market access guys with very little experience. It's not their fault, but very little experience of what it takes to launch a new brand and the unique issues associated with that. So I'm compared with Sudeep, I'm going more the internal route, which in some respects might be easier to fix, which would be trying to kind of reconnect the strategy and the processes and the resources, both at the global, the regional, and the local level, and maybe try to kind of improve communication and collaboration between those either geographically disparate groups, and also those kind of groups that are linked less by experience, in terms of they might be marketing or they might be regulatory, and therefore they tend to be a little bit siloed as well. So anything that could fix that would be useful.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other point anyone wants to highlight? Susan, you have the floor.
Yeah, if I may, Susan,
Oh, please.
I love the points that Sudeep and Jonathan brought up, internalities, externalities. I think what the common denominator here is people, right? Jonathan mentioned skill set, Sudeep in terms of the pipeline and patient populations and targets and etc. We need to remember every day, and consultants here present, Jonathan, myself, Susan, we remind ourselves every day, this is an endeavor from people, with people, for people. And
Yes.
culture is crucial. It's a long journey that, as Jonathan said, ideally should not start 6 months before an NDA or BLA, or it's a year-long endeavor. And keeping people focused with the same lexicon, with the same understanding of what success looks like, and how we measure and how we correct course preemptively and not reactively. This people element, human, cultural element, which always existed, is now under significant strains, socioeconomic, political, and we can go on. So elements like we are discussing today, this cross-pollination on how to do it better is vital for any launches, any place in the world.
Thank you, Christiana. Anyone, Susan, Aina?
Well, I think all my colleagues did a really nice job. I just had a few other items that I had jotted down around this question that I thought I would share. And I think what came top of mind for me was around regulatory hurdles and supply chain shortages. And that's obviously caused and to top of mind for many due to the recent pandemic. So with the agency being understaffed as well as high turnover, you have a lot of new people now setting the guidances, and that has certainly lost, companies have lost some of that historical perspective who have been the reviewers throughout the drug development process. On the supply chain side, I mentioned this earlier, certainly if you're on a drug, if you have a drug that you can scale up and you can put on the shelf to get ready for launch, that's one thing, and you can try to scavenge it. But if you are scaling out because you have a personalized medicine, that can become a significant challenge when you think about how you're going to have the materials to manufacture the drug once approved. I know my colleagues brought up market access and reimbursement. Two other things I just jotted down were poor product differentiation. So, not getting the buy-in to prescribe the drug, as well as unfavorable clinical findings, which could lead to, unanticipated data that, for instance, you're left with like a black box warning or something that was not anticipated.
Great point. Yep.
Yeah, maybe I could add a couple of points from a data practitioner point of view. So great points so far raised, and definitely can relate to all of them in terms of both externalities and internal factors. To emphasize a couple of them maybe is definitely one of them is around the need of very large multidisciplinary task forces to collaborate efficiently and fast in the launch process. So one of the challenges that I'm seeing is kind of like I call it lack of translation factors. So basically, health information can be very detailed and also very broad, and how to determine the correct information flow between these parties that actually enables them to be actors of decision and lesser of actors of impediment of the speed. That's and how they work with each other in terms of roles and responsibilities, translating the knowledge and being able to be consultative in the areas that is kind of like more adjacent to their expertise, and being a decision maker sit in the areas that are core of their expertise. So that whole kind of like expert decision system type of processes. And maybe the other one is related to how we really learn and how we really leverage the learnings from the prior stages. So basically, we'll talk about it potentially further, but how do we, if we were able to leverage the clinical trial information to actually derive the value to the customers who are patients or condition sufferers, right? So how do we being able to bring some of those learnings from prior launches or from earlier stages into the launch process and really inform the process? Kind of lack of that, and doing sometimes things from the beginning, reinventing the wheel in a way, would be potentially one of the challenges that I'm seeing in the launch.
Thank you, Aina.
Yeah. True.
So should we move to the next question then? And goes to
Yes,
Aina.
please. Yep.
Yeah. So the question is, what technologies do you foresee can make the biggest impact on drug launch process? Aina, what do you think? Because
thanks for that. And I'll be a starter of the answer. This is very big question, obviously, and I'm sure folks here will have a lot of thoughts and angles. So think of this more of a kind of like a topic starter. So I'll start with a few examples and a few thoughts, and we'll pass it to the next contributor to this vast topic. So like basically just kind of like leaning on what we just discussed in terms of the challenges. One of the types of technologies that can be that I think will be really impactful, but also developing, we can call them process technologies. Those are technologies that actually enable, or we can call them pharma operations processes, the technologies. These are technologies that really enable forecast, supply chain, predictability, collaboration between different parties. So these are the technologies, they can be both quantitative data driven, and kind of like, the LLM types, which is, more of the language models. But really the goal of these technologies, and of course they utilize cloud, cloud as well, cloud technologies. But the purpose of them is really to enable multiple parties to collaborate and decision make in the complex processes. They enable interaction between human and automatic component, basically human in the loop type of technologies, where experts can provide their contribution and guidance to the decision-making system or to the decision guiding system, whereas some of the repetitive components of the tasks, as well as information collection, is taken care by the automated component. Those are also technologies that collect vast amounts of information related to every launch, that ranges from regulatory to clinical to to the market, to legal and compliance type of factors, and kind of brings it all together, allows to leverage this information. So this is kind of like one of the types of technologies that I'm thinking will be impactful in the future. Another one is kind of like more related to how digital technologies operate in general, and how they operate in this kind of mixed of digital and physical environment, as we are going through a lot of digitization in healthcare, a lot of really digital delivery, both because of COVID, but both because of the efficiency. We have a lot of now telehealth and other aspects, remote patient monitoring. So how do we actually collect that digital encounter and this digital journey information and enable it into the physical component? It's known that, you know, the new drug launches, that the new conversations about new treatments are sort of traditionally more effective in a face-to-face interaction. So how do we really use this digital technology when our digital component is growing? And here I think there can be some learning from other industries that are already effectively utilizing digital technologies for new product launches. So this is kind of like the second type of tools and technologies. And the last one would be real world data. That is definitely my, how to say it, I wouldn't be able not to mention some of the data component, but really utilizing real world evidence data, both structured and unstructured, in informing the, you know, the next stage, in informing the test and learn. So basically technologies that allow quickly to collect the data, collect the information, and really go into facilitating this modular test and learn cycle. So how do we take, you know, initial learning, test them in a small modular format, maybe in a trial, then apply it to the next stage of the roll up, and then bring it back into planning and strategies. So again, they can be, from the tool perspective, both quantitative and non-quantitative type of data, but they are really in essence data-driven decision applications. We can say some of it is AI or some of it is just data-driven applications, depending on the word we want to use. But I think this will be extremely impactful as we kind of like try to get to a more planned approach in the launch process itself. And would love to hear and pass it back to the moderator for additional thoughts of everyone.
Thank you. Great points. You know, again, we are on the same journey. So some of the points you mentioned are some of the things that we want to address using our platform. It's also kind of optimizing a process as well as enabling collaboration. But at the same time, I would like to hear more from the other panelists if anyone has any points to kind of add on to what Aina had to say. So,
maybe I can just mention a quick thought then, Abby. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that and I think somebody mentioned, I think it was Christina mentioned it earlier on, it's incredibly complex to launch a product. You've got so many people, you've got so many opinions, personalities, takes on the data, viewpoints, strategies, sub-strategies, one country thinking that they should go green and the other country thinking they should go yellow, and another country thinking that red is the only way to go. So something that could, and of course, this is something that people, I think it was, who was it was talking about? It was Christina talking about people. That's, when it comes down to an efficient launch, it's really getting all your troops together and marching to the same kind of beat, and saying similar, not the same things, because that'd be boring, but similar things, such that what people would be saying at the global level would be replicated in India or Colombia, and that everything is kind of based on data and agreed, and people are moving forward. This often takes a lot of time, and there's little hiccups and disagreements and data surprises along the way that make life interesting. So my view would be that some kind of, again, I'm thinking more internal than external, because I don't think we can fix everything that easily. That, you know, science will move forward and help us with those things. But I think if I was sitting in GSK today and I saw the pipeline coming through, I'd be thinking, well, let's say I was running the company, you know, why not? Then I'd be thinking, are we ready? Are we going in the right direction? Does everybody kind of agree with the direction we're going? Does everybody understand the competitors and what their advantages may or may not be over ours? And specifically then across market access, marketing, regulatory, medical, all of those different areas. Is everybody focused and agreed on the way to move forward? So if there was something that would simplify that, so that whenever I was asking, are we ready to launch, the answer could be simplified into 3 or 4 slides at the top end of a complex deck of PowerPoint slides, then that would be very useful.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great point again. Christiana, I thought you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would love, again, agreeing with everything that Jonathan and Hina have said, and double-clicking on something that you said, Hina. We, in rare genetic disorders, finding patients and what is the right patient at what stage of the patient journey that Sudeep brought up is critical. Making sure that you have this very, very cumbersome patient journey that encompasses several visits to several generalists and specialists throughout the years, with exams that burden the healthcare system, not to mention the patient and the family, is critical to be streamlined. So I look forward to technologies, and there have been and there are in development some technologies that are developing algorithms in which the different characteristics and exams and labs and imaging can be combined, can be prospected and combined from several different databases to identify where the patients are and what is the right moment to start treating. So that would be my wish, my wish in my wish list. Finding patients that need on the right time at the right place.
I had a point. I mean, it's connected to what Christiana mentioned, and to some extent, Jonathan also mentioned. It's so from an external point of view. So when I am looking at, say, partnering with the HTA bodies, okay, of different countries. Now, there is a big gap, especially the launches that are happening in specialty, in rare, in orphan. There's a big capacity gap and knowledge gap between what the innovations are coming out in the market and what the system can do at this point of time. Now, that gap has to be bridged quickly. And I think, brand launch excellence has to address that very quickly. Aina mentioned about real world evidence. That's part of it. The question is that how quickly the HTA bodies can turn it around and understand the value of the innovation that are coming into the market. So the partnership and the collaboration has to be seen and has to be perceived to be given to the right recipient of the solution. For that, we need to have a kind of a technology kind of a solution, which is very, very important. And I believe that there are some solutions which are available, but at the same time, we do see the delays that are happening in terms of the launches is because of the lack of understanding and lack of capacity between the innovation or innovative solutions and the HTA bodies. That, I believe, is something that needs to also be addressed, and some solution has to be brought in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudeep. Any other point anyone has?
Yeah, we have some points that are being brought up in the chat, if I may bring what Dan said. And Jonathan, you mentioned that a while back, right? A launch preparation does not start 1 year or the year of an NDA or BLA. It starts way early in discovery and development, and making sure this cross-functional understanding and collaboration happens early on. So, to your point, when we are designing clinical development programs, we have endpoints that are aligned not only with the clinical needs of those patients, but also, more importantly nowadays, on what the HTAs are going to demand, right? And so you have a plan that is not only based on the minimum level of clinical data that is going to put your foot at the door of the regulatory agencies, whichever they are, but more importantly, that you have a clinical development program that is suitable for the clinic once the approval is hopefully achieved, and it is going to successfully overcome the hurdle of HTA approvals. So this element that Dan brought up is also a key knowledge gap that I agree with you, Dan, that has plagued some companies.
Thank you, Christiana.
Christiana, just a quick follow-up question on that. Is this, do you think there's some kind of responsibility from these organizations to try to simplify and be much clearer about what their expectations are and how that they are assessing a particular kind of package? Because, you know, market access really was kind of smoke and mirrors, and arguably it could be argued is still that way. And then you've got the health technology assessments, you've got all these areas where people are making great kind of you know, they're important areas, but to what extent do you think that it's also behoves them and it's their responsibility to be just a little bit clearer about how they assess and what outcomes they're looking for and where that is going in terms of assessment of a particular medicine?
Yes, I agree, Jonathan, that again, we are talking about launches that are intrinsically coordination of communication, people, and objectives, right? So HTA goals, and my career comes from last century, in which for rare disorders, we would go under the radar. If you're talking about 5,000 patients, as Sudeep said, worldwide, no one would even care about discussing with you whether or not there should be a reimbursement. Nowadays, this has changed significantly in the past 30 years, 25, 30 years. And the HTA bar is becoming higher and higher and higher. Ina is here to keep me honest. And it's only going to be continuously higher. So this communication, back to my point, building up on Dan's comment, this communication on what is going to be measured 3, 5, 7 years down the road when my program comes to maturity. We are now hypothetically in phase 1. We are designing what is going to be this long-term endeavor. This conversation has to start so early. And this launch leadership has to be so clear-eyed that the macroeconomic pressures and political pressures will only increase. The IRA here in the US, HTA pressures in countries like Germany that had always been very open and very welcoming to rare and orphan drugs. This has changed. This has significantly changed. So the communication, I am agreeing violently with you here that the communication has to go both ways. And there has to be a better proactivity from the drug side, the pharma biotech side, to reach out to HTAs really early. Susan brought it up that the regulatory and payer stakeholders are understaffed. They're not going to reach out to us. We have to reach out to them.
Yeah, and as someone who kind of like works on the other side, I can also attest that this fragmentation of kind of like value chain and lack of transparency and black box. Some of the processes being black box, it's really impacts, you know, the overall effectiveness, because there are ways to learn from those use cases, from that information. But if they are siloed and there is no transparency of what happens at that phase, then this information kind of like is not able to be leveraged, and that impacts the overall. So definitely having more transparency and technologies that are maybe enabling that, or who have a side effect of almost like a technologies where transparency factor, even process management in technology, how like agile processes work that are more transparent in nature, that would be extremely impactful for the folks who are kind of like really realizing some of the aspects of the launches as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aina. Great point again. So any additional points, or I can move to Christiana with the third question?
Let's go. Yeah.
So the question is, what are the biggest impact, whether it's revenue, reputation? I know you mentioned people, so people is also one of the points of a failed drug launch. And we keep hearing every time the impact, how many people have been fired. So this is one of the biggest news in the industry, across industry. So
yes, and it all gets more taxing and more pressing to do it right at the first time, right? We say in the US, measure twice to cut it once. So prepare. There has always been the rule of thumb that a launch can be deemed successful or otherwise in the first 6 months. And I would wager that this time frame is actually getting shorter because of macroeconomic pressures, because of regulatory and especially payer pressures. So there is the obvious impact on revenue, right? This goes without saying, but there is the significant long-term impact on appetite for innovation as a whole for the industry. More that the general public sees biotech, pharma, healthcare system as a whole as an expensive and inefficient industry, the worse it is for those who play in the industry. And of course, my perspective is very biased. This industry is pivotal for the buildup of countries' economic health, right? Without health, you don't have wealth.
yes.
Therefore, to do it right is critical. There is the obvious revenue and share value impact, but there is the underbelly of it, which is support of innovation, fostering innovation that is becoming, getting funding for innovation that is becoming the key challenge of any startup nowadays. So to do it right on the first attempt is critical. Jonathan and Sudeep and Susan and Ina have brought up already how the skill set is not broadly available. We need to be more humble in reach out to each other in the industry. We need to be less siloed across companies and more humble, that we are all in this for the long run.
Great point. Really love it, this point. And so anyone wants to add anything to this? Any additional points you want to add to this point? Because we all spoke about collaboration. We all spoke about challenges, people coming together.
Abby, could I just mention one thing there? And that's so not all drugs that are launched are innovative. So, and some of the quite successful ones have actually been third or fourth in line behind a couple of failed launches that were attempted, but were not smart and were aiming in the wrong area, and the pricing was wrong, and they hadn't gone through the due diligence with the payers, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So the sad reality is that, and so if we take rare diseases out of it, which are extremely important and laudable, and of course are usually more innovative, and just look at, here comes another drug from a class which is already on the market, we don't do ourselves any favors by bringing those brands out if they're not aimed at a particular need, whether it be for patients or it's a clinical trial, a therapy, a kind of a niche within a therapy area that is actually of interest. And so I think partly our reputation suffers a little bit if Me Too's continue to be attempted to be launched.
Yep, that's a great challenge, I guess. With all the innovation that we are talking about, Me Too's will also stay, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of easy to launch an innovative product because guess what? It's innovative. That's not to say it was easy to create innovation as it relates to that particular compound. But if you got there, and that's maybe what we're talking about, that's part of the pre-launch process, particularly within looking at the clinical trials and the market access and the regulatory issues, etc. But if you got it there, then it's relatively not simple, that's the wrong word, but it's easier than the fourth brand in a group that's already out there and doing relatively well.
Yep, great point. Anyone wants to add anything or share anything to what Jonathan had said?
I would add a different perspective, Jonathan, if I may. So I agree with you that the fourth in line of a statin, right, or growth hormone or hemophilia factor replacement, these are very, very fragmented therapeutic areas. And what does another Me Too add? I agree with you that there is a diminishing rate of return for the patient and for the industry and for the community. But I wonder if these, and here in the US, Europe is ahead, but here in the US, we have now a wave of biosimilars that have been approved and now will be available in the market. I wonder if the Me Too biosimilars or more commoditized versions are also, or should also be used as an opportunity for reframing the healthcare system. And again, Europe has done that better or more proactively, but we are in a moment that the macroeconomic pressures are so marked that can we use the Me Too's, the follow-on biologics to open an underserved market? And how can we do that? So provided, of course, that the clinical efficacy and safety balance is there and it's well established, but how can we broaden the access to these therapies that should be baseline treatment? Yeah, again, I'm putting aside as well specialty care, rare diseases, and whatever else, cutting edge oncology. I think it is an opportunity for us to rethink the way that we provide care.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you. So we move to the last question of the discussion, which is, I'm open to if Suzanne, you want to take it, or Jonathan. Suzanne, if you're okay to take it.
I'm happy to. Mine's relatively quick and probably.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I can chime in after you.
Oh, you go ahead. Ladies first, if I'm allowed to say that.
No gender rules here, but.
Go on, Susan. You go ahead. You go first.
Yeah. So if I had a superpower to bring positive change to the industry, mine was really more around more diversity in clinical trials to improve healthcare equity, and also thinking about how we can leverage the data from real world data to help be able to treat all patient populations. And something that's talked about a lot right now and is super hot, obviously, is artificial intelligence. But I do wonder how that will impact people of, intersectionality or diverse ethnicities who are particularly mixed, for example, like myself, who's half Asian and half African American. Like, when you think about how, and I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but how that data is generated and utilized, just to make sure that, I think there's a lot of power behind that, but making sure that we don't exclude certain populations or lead them down the wrong treatment paths because of that. So that would be mine.
So Jonathan,
I
you
think
wanted to add?
that's a good point. And I don't understand AI, but maybe I'm just an optimist. But and Abby will probably correct me on this one. But I would imagine that AI would be the ideal opportunity to kind of pick up on more diverse populations and those areas rather than what we had before, which was more kind of, trailing through the data ourselves. But I'll leave that one to Abby to deal with. Now, mine was a relatively simple one, and it's kind of you have in companies, you have marketing departments, and marketing departments tend to be a brand manager, marketing manager, head of marketing, and they kind of all look after the products that they've got for that particular company, and that's kind of really good. And then on the other side, you've got kind of the more theoretical groups like commercial excellence, thought leadership, those kind of things, where the people who are in those groups would be focusing on how you best go about launching products. But sometimes it feels to me that then they are people who are not necessarily very close to the market or the actual job of bringing a particular brand to launch. So my superpower would be to bring in a kind of group, which is a hands-on tactical pre-launch team that maybe pick up on a product, 4-5 years out, bring it through to the launch, and these would be individuals and people who are expert in bringing brands to launch, rather than necessarily people who are potentially a little bit theoretical in terms of how they look at patient journeys or those kind of areas, or equally people who've been a jobbing marketing guy looking after a brand that's now 10 years old, and that's different skills that are involved in that. So in a nutshell, I'd be looking for a kind of pre-launch experts whose job it is to successfully launch brands in pharmaceutical companies and make them as important to a company as the regulatory teams, the medical teams, the market access teams, etc.
Great point again. Yeah, love it. Just on the AI bit, I think we have Aina here, who comes from data background, and she will have a lot of answers. But I can tell that data input is important based on what kind of data. Otherwise, we pull in biases, and the output will have a lot of bias. So AI data has to be QC'd, and we have to ensure that whatever data we have in across clinical trial or whatever area we are in has to be properly checked, and we have the right types, archetypes to kind of get the right kind of information out. Is my point, but Aina, I leave it to you.
I can chime in a little bit. So basically, I know there is a lot of talk about AI these days, and it's a very popular word. With that said, what a lot of things that we do in data technology, be it machine learning, AI, statistical modeling, etc., is really learning from the prior data. In that sense, rare diseases versus high prevalence conditions can be sort of compared to minor ethnic groups versus large populations. So if there is not enough representation in a data, there needs to be a methodology and adjustment for that specific type of either conditions or patients or ethnicities that will be really incorporated into methodology for the bias elimination. It can and it should be coming eventually from kind of like bias elimination perspective. It's a known issue. It's a known challenge in healthcare. There is this big topic related to access to care and what populations have access to care. So if a group has low access to care in the first place, then just using data as is without those adjustments, we will eventually create models and solutions that are really sort of biased in a sense that they are not incorporating enough of this population, and then we are not really providing enough awareness or enough outreach for those folks. And all of this really needs to be customized with the group, taking into account their initial participation in care in case it is low. So it does need work, in my view.
And again, going back to Jonathan's point, so this is a question for both Christiana and Sudeep. When it comes to getting this launch team together, what do you think is the biggest challenge? We know we have this team coming together to launch. Some of the time it's kind of, at least -3 years pre-launch comes together, or maybe 2 years. Is resource an issue? Is the right people an issue? Or is bringing the team together an issue? So what do you think is the biggest issue with pharma companies? They have been launching, they have been failing, and this is a known problem for years. Why has this not got addressed in so many years?
If I may start, Jonathan, I think, Abhi, that it has been let in the back burner for years, because for years we in the industry could afford inefficiencies, and it's not the case anymore. So all the problems that you listed are absolutely pressing, right? Jonathan mentioned many times lack of skill. You just mentioned lack of staff. In my consulting world, as in startups, the hiring process is usually very delayed. So but having said all that, which are all factors and pressing factors, and in the world that we cannot afford inefficiencies anymore, I think if I could choose one factor, is visibility. So in the ideal scenario, you would have a person that has developed the skill set, has earned the stripes, right? And it does not demand a huge team, but it does demand senior leadership visibility. This is not a side job gig for someone in the brand department. This makes it or breaks it in a startup evolution. And it more and more makes it and breaks it for even established pharma company share value. So the visibility with senior management, and the visibility in the sense not only of one-way communication, but feedback and resource availability. That would be my wish as well. Another one wish for my list. Jonathan, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah. So Abhi, I would look at it. Of course, what Christiana mentioned is one way. The other way would be also making the solution available from, say, the biology of the solution to the patient, okay, to the patient journey. Now, in that whole process, it's a lengthy process, okay? So if you are coming to, say, N-36, what is happening in the industry today is a constant churning of people, okay? So the people comes in, experts come in, then people move out. It's kind of, in many companies, it's a swing door. People come in and then go out within 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. So the information that has been there, the knowledge that has been there is lost. So a consolidated system and process, which is supposed to be there because the product probably has moved 20 years or 15 years or 10 years, whatever, depends upon the R&D of the capability of the company. After 10 years, when you were there in the last 3 years or 4 years of commercialization, you kind of see that happening almost every quarter. The information which was there in Q4, suddenly you see in the month of August, people are back from summer holidays, it's not there because 2 key persons have left. Okay, so that's what is happening. So we need to have a system and a process which will keep this and say that, okay, this is the change that has happened from Q4 of 2022 to before the summer in Europe. Okay, and the whole milestone's been captured, and whether the person or persons are there or not, the system throws it up, saying that, okay, we need to take a corrective action, we need to find a solution and move forward, not to restart the process again. And this happens almost every time. And as Christiana mentioned, we got away with inefficiencies in said 15 years back. Today, no, we can't. Even just to connect something that Jonathan said earlier, even in rare disease portfolio or an orphan disease portfolio, every molecule has at least 3 different platforms ready to be launched. So if I'm talking about neuromuscular disease, if we're talking about really rare cancers, you have 3-4 molecules ready to be launched from biotech companies, big pharmas. So hence, the critical factor is that N-36, N-24, N-12 to have that information captured, assessed, looked at, and delivered.
Thank you, Sudeep.
I think that Sudeep makes a really, really good point. I love his expression churning of people, because it's so true. The number of times that I've heard people, or I've said it myself, the words are, haven't we done this before? And people will scratch their heads and they'll say, well, yeah, but that guy has moved over to Belgium now and he's doing a kind of corporate, and you think, oh my God, so what, we're gonna do the whole thing again because the one person has moved to a different role? It's crazy. So good point, Sudeep.
Thank you. Dr. Dushyant had a question. I think it's open to the panel if you want to answer. How can pharma companies ensure ethical implementation of digital transformations in drug launches, especially regarding safeguarding data privacy and obtained information patient consent? I think it's again to do with clinical trial, and Aina, I guess I saw your response. Anyone wants to address that?
I can make a try. I think from at least from European perspective, the GDPR laws are pretty strong. There is absolutely no way you can do something like this. Patient information, informed patient consent, etc., etc. So if you look at the pharma market, we are talking about U4 plus UK, US, Japan. Not sure so much about China, but at least these countries where to some major extent there is an ethical implementation of digital transformation possible, and it's done. The only additional complexity is in US, where you have direct to patients, and but in Japan and in EU do not have. So hence there is that discrepancy that is there, how much you can go. Now we know for sure that in UK, almost every quarter you find a big pharma being pulled up by the regulatory authorities or the industry authorities for doing something naughty. Not sure whether that's naughty or not, but they call it naughty, so they pull them up. So it's pretty strict, at least in this part of the world. So you can say that there is sensibilities which the industry takes very seriously. The leaders of the industry do take these very seriously. Of course, there are exceptions which will always be there, and we are human finally. Okay, so that's what I would say that, okay, we are in the mid path, but we are probably in the right path. Okay.
If I may add the US perspective on this. So Sudeep, you're absolutely right that regulations are more evolved and more cautious in Europe than what we have established here in the US. Having said that, the speed of technological development regulatory bodies will have a very hard time in catching up, in keeping up and catching up and keeping up. So I think that the price is a constant vigilance, as with any new technology. And especially with the technology, and if we're encompassing AI in digital transformations here, technology becomes a black box. And the functioning of algorithms will become very opaque. Therefore, And that puts even more pressure on people and skill set. Therefore, I think that there has to be, from pharma companies especially, a very thorough assessment of what are the risks in undertaking any or absorbing any new technology. And I am not advocating of non-adopting or lack of adoption. I am just saying that that has to be done with very clear risk assessment and risk addressment plan, right? What are the modes of failure of a possible technological meltdown? How can we go down? How can we go under? And what can we do to prevent it? And that is a cycle, right? You identify modes of failure, you design ameliorating processes and checks and balances, and you go back to the beginning because it will be a constant evolution. Regulatory bodies will have a very, very hard time in protecting us from that. And I think it is incumbent upon the industry to make sure that our patient data is protected.
Agree, 100%. So, Pankaj, I hand it over to you. It's like we've just had a 1 hour of discussion.
Yeah,
So
I didn't want to interrupt since I could see so much passion in every panelist's eyes while they were talking about the industry, the challenges, and the digital transformation. So no, this has been really fantastic. But let's move on to the next segment of the event, where we are all going to roast Abhijit. And
Yes.
Abhi, I'm sure, is going to take all the questions very lightly in a very fun way. So Abhi, why don't we do a brief pitch on ConformanceX and then get the feedback questions from the panelists. And the questions and feedback has to be honest, direct. Okay, let's go ahead. Awesome. We see your screen. Please go ahead.
So I'll give you a quick overview of what we do and how we started. So I kind of mentioned any new drug takes almost around 10 years and one drug hits the market. But the challenge we're trying to highlight here in the discussion is all about the launch excellence piece. And we think launch excellence is a challenge which has not been addressed so far by the industry. We all know that launch delays are common, and the recent reports are kind of scary. These are reports from EY, IQVIA, Deloitte, and McKinsey. They have highlighted that more than 90% drug launches are failing and 42% are performing below pre-pandemic benchmark. So a huge loss to the industry. And like there was a new data point that I've got from this discussion was Christina mentioned that we used to say performance is the first 6 months is critical to success. Now this time span is also getting kind of short, and we need to ensure that we get the success much faster. So our solution, we call it the new science of drug launch success. Our platform is an intelligent IT platform with expert human oversight, and it connects people, intelligence, target audience. What we have done is we've created frameworks wherein we talk of launch excellence, impact navigator, and we kind of track every launch task by function to ensure that what task could impact what other task, so that you can kind of optimize your launch process throughout the journey. And it can be implemented from any time when you plan your launch. This is also aided by our board of advisors and a group of brand launch experts that we have come together. How it works? So it comprises of 3 kind of very segments. The first one is called Planner, wherein you have more than 1,500 plus tasks across multiple functions. You could create your launch planner archetype within like hours. And once you decide on a brand, like it's a rare disease, there are pre-populated plans, which you could look at, and you could customize those for your system. You assign to stakeholder and the system takes over. It starts automatically, predicting and recommending. We kind of at the back end, we program it, and it starts sharing early warning as highlights or risks in the program or the process. So it kind of red flags anything that gets stuck, so that you know what all can get impacted. What is the budget impact? The system does that on its own. What are the key differentiators? So what I wanted to highlight here was this was designed for life science companies by global brand launch experts. My whole team of advisors, we are all from the pharma industry. We have worked with different senior brand launch experts, taken their feedback, and we have done more than 100 workshops and meetings to get to the back end of the system. So all the task has got data behind it. We can tell you what is going to be the impact. So the system is customizable, easy to integrate so that you can create your own plan. It's scalable. You can have multi-country, multi-brand. It is flexible. It can import your frameworks from other tools if you have for some brand and create your own specifics. It is safe and secure. We understand pharma. It is GDPR and HIPAA compliant. So it's just a quick overview of the journey since we're tight on time. What we want to achieve is based on the data we have. I'd just like to highlight, we are validating the models that we have created. We have done 100+ scenarios and our MVP is ready to be tested in real world. What we believe, and we have checked with a lot of experts, that you don't have launch benchmark by tasks or by therapy area. So these are the things that we think we will be able to deliver in the next 3 years. AI-based drug launch archetypes, therapy area analogs. You can get an optimized budget and timeline, what's going to impact you at what point of time, what you should do, how you can optimize. So these are factors that we think our drug launch platform would be able to deliver to you. Here's a quick overview of the leadership team. So we have already met the two of us, Ankitash. Simon is an ex-director from BBC. Robert Glaser is an ex-senior VP Merck US. He handles our US marketing. And we have already met Jonathan and Sudeep from our advisory board. And we have more of such advisors who have only worked on brand launch across different segments. This is the strategic roadmap. We are right now validating our product. We are doing scenarios. So this is something that's happening at the back end. And once we get a real-time drug, whether it's a rare disease or oncology or any therapy area, we think we will be able to validate our models. And once we have done that, we will go all out across USA and Europe in the next 12 months. That's the plan. And once we have a fully validated model, we think in the next 18 months, we'll have a SaaS-based model. And we plan to go all out in the next 2 years in global expansion. And this is something I think we all have addressed. Our core target is, like Christiana, you mentioned, that we want to go to first-time launches who really struggle with resources and small entrepreneurial company, because we know this data as well. 59% of all new drug launches across industry will be from first-time launches. So this is something we are targeting, and we want to help them out, to help them optimize their launch plan. And we all know that big companies, it is not easy to get in, the hierarchy with so many different kind of, levels of blocks across. But we are talking to a lot of other companies. This is one slide I wanted to just avoid. It's not an investment discussion, but this is where we are. And I think we're in very good shape right now with the planning module as well as the predictor and recommender module ready to go. Recommender is the one we are validating as we are talking, because we're creating scenarios, but unless we get a real life project, we don't think that is something we want to take to the market. I wanted to keep it short. Yeah.
No, this was good. Thank you, Abhi. Let's take questions.
Yes, I'm open for any questions from anyone, me and Ankitash.
Abhi, could you please go through slide, I think 7, that you have the yesterday, today, tomorrow, that you have your MVP, where you are in time. I think that was the slide 7, please.
Yeah, sure. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, that's it. So what I loved again, even before this conversation today. So first of all, you're providing the scaffolding, the backbone, and the structure, right, around launches. And one of the critical elements of for any team is to have mental space to manage, to handle, to find solutions for the unforeseen. And when you have a tool like this, you plan your work and you work your plan. So you have the bandwidth for handling what is going to come, because it will hit you really fast, right? It's like the ER. You don't know what is going to come, but it's going to come. What I love about your tool is that you have prospected, and the Monte Carlo simulations, you have prospected real world data on launches. I am sure that Ina is going to love that as well. So real examples that you have compiled to make your recommendations the benchmark or the best possibly available given the experience. My question for you is that, in addition to having the outcome of this prospection of best practices in the tool, do you plan to have any element of education? Because that addresses a point that Jonathan brought up several times on the skill set or limitations on skill set.
We plan to, even there are a lot of plans, to be honest. And if I show you the roadmap, in the next 18 months, Ankitash can highlight, we have a roadmap plan. We want to start with good practice, good launch practice. That is something we want to start as early as 12 months, This is what you should do. And this will be kind of written and endorsed by senior launch experts like you, Jonathan, who has been there, done that, so that you follow a certain roadmap, a certain framework and path. And then we are talking of the benchmarks, which will come as we get more and more data by task, by therapy area, because we want to validate before we launch the benchmarks in the market. So we want to take our time and get it right. We don't want to get, because this is something you cannot risk. And there are lives, patients, everything is in count. And so we want to take that time, validate, check with experts, and then on the launch. But good launch practice is something we want to have. We have a whole roadmap, and I'm happy to have another discussion to share that. So there are a lot of things planned. Yes, definitely. We also plan to get patent on the recommendation engine, which we kind of, we are kind of collating all the data to run AI. Like, so we understand we have an AI expert. We don't want to have any biased data, because if you get one data wrong and, the percentage would vary. So we are trying to do everything possible to kind of minimize all kind of negativity and show the right picture.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana.
I'll add one more point to Abhijit's, Christiana, because I think there was another point in the discussion which came up that around the resourcing. There aren't many people who are very experienced to do these kind of launches, and that's actually a very big industry problem. So one of our another program in our roadmap is to build a community around launch practices, wherein education definitely is a piece, but then there has to be a peer-to-peer communication as well. And that has to be an industry-wide communication, because as an industry, we are doing a much larger good than just, creating revenue for our company. So that is why there has to be a peer-to-peer community which shares their experiences, their learnings, or their whatever ideas they have to ensure that the best medicine reaches to the end user, which is the patient.
Yeah, and here I can't avoid the question because, as we all recognize, it does take a lot of cross-disciplinary forces and tasks and expertises to really launch any treatment. And kind of like this whole orchestration component is really very important. With that said, every tool usually has this kind of like early adopters or the coveted set of users, or the ones who kind of take it and run with it more than others. So what kind of departments or roles or functions do you see as your kind of like, primary initial driving forces behind the adoption of this tool?
I believe medical affairs and market access would be very interesting to start with, and then regulatory, of course. But I think medical affairs has a big say, because the commercial team comes into play, the marketing and commercial team comes into play like a little later in the journey, I guess. But again, we are open right now. We have got all the framework done, and we would be happy to kind of, embed anyone on the process of the journey. Yeah, Christiana, you wanted to ask something.
No, it's interesting, your perspective. I am learning as much as you can't imagine here. It's interesting, your perspective that the medical affairs team should be brought up earlier. And I am not disagreeing, right? Especially as we navigate towards more and more specialized medicines, the knowledge and education, data gathering, real world evidence has to be garnered or prepared for really early on. Who, and building up on Ina's question, who do you think would be the key owner of this tool? Who is the father, mother of this tool in a company?
That's a great question. And we have been talking to some people. As far as we have come to know, it's like if a drug is in phase 2B and they think they're planning to launch the drug, the first point is always, it seems like the launch excellence lead or the head of launch excellence. And we want to reach out to that person because that person has these 4 departments under him. Clinical, because they kind of input what's happening and where they are, the regulatory, the market access, and then medical affairs. And then they kind of start enrolling the marketing and other heads into the team. This is again based on discussion, but my experience, and we're discussing with so many companies in the last 2 years, one thing for sure I've realized that every company behaves in very different way. And that's a strange thing we have noticed. And like Aina would have laughed if I would have answered clinical trial. This is such a strong domain, when it comes to clinical trials, and there are such big players. It's very difficult to get in as a startup to even get into clinical trials data. And no one is ready to share those data. So we kept clinical trials out, and we know it will come at a certain extent from the regulatory or the medical affairs team. But if you want to get into clinical trial as the first thing, we knew from the start that it's something that would be difficult. I don't know if I've answered you right, but I'd like to hear your guidance and inputs if there is something we could do to kind of, embed or make it better.
I think the companies that I've worked for, Abby, in the past, and it didn't always go down that well, I have to say, but the expectation was that the launch lead would be working hand in hand with medical affairs, clinical, market access, all those key kind of areas of expertise. Rightly or wrongly, the nominated lead for that team, and you do have to have a lead for that team, otherwise you have lots of spinning tops going in random directions, was the commercial person. And the reason for that was that you can have all sorts of interesting science, and you obviously need that. You can have all sorts of knowledge of how health technology assessments work and market access and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, given that it's a commercial organization beholden to shareholders to try to drive revenues and profit, that the lead would usually wouldn't necessarily be in a commercial part of the organization, but they would have had quite a strong either financial or commercial background to kind of guide the different areas along the way.
Completely agree. And most of the launch leads are generally, marketing heads or commercial leads or head of therapy areas. So they have worked on that rare disease drug or oncology drug. You're definitely 100%. Yeah. But they always have a team and different point of contacts for the different functions. So it's always a group. If I may say, Christian, it's never one person, but one person is definitely the lead, but then they kind of work together.
Well, yeah, it has to be a group, because with the best one in the world, there's no one person who has all that information in their brain cells and would be able to kind of implement a strategy across the globe such that it was all kind of synced up and working well. So without a team, it's doomed to failure. And the more people you get in the team from the different areas of expertise, the better. But it has to be a functioning team as well. If you have too many people, I sat in meetings where you've got 30, 40 odd people all saying their bit, and it's hopeless. So you've got to have experienced people who understand the rules, the regulations, the areas of focus, but equally all moving forward globally, regionally, and locally. And they would then be working their magic with their colleagues in those countries as you progress towards launch.
Definitely, that's what we would love to see, one such pilot, that's what we are kind of gunning for right now.
So Abhi, what kind of competition that you face, the big IQVIA type, people that are in the race with you, or you still have startups like your which provides flexibility and more innovation, probably better price for companies. So what kind of competition do you face when you approach a company for a pilot or services?
So that's again is a great question, and you'll be surprised to know we have spoken with 2 big pharma and again 1 small pharma as well. You'll be surprised to know that they didn't have a brand launch kind of excellence platform or a launch excellence platform. All the functions used to collate the data in either Excel or smart sheets. And we recently had a discussion with one of the major big pharma, they were literally looking for ideas. They were fencing for ideas. So there are companies, Sudeep, just to answer your questions, who are in the space, but we have positioned ourselves a little differently because we're looking at the bigger picture and we're talking of an end-to-end solution rather than just providing a tracker where you track. So there are a lot of companies at startups, who are tracking and using Excel or smart sheets or web-based tool. But we have gone a step beyond. We're talking of the risk impact navigator. We're talking of predictor and recommender, meaning we have not only allowing you to plan, you create your own archetype. We're also helping you to kind of, check risk, create frameworks that would help by function. And we will connect you to experts, can help you if you're stuck. So that's how we have kind of structured the whole thing, because we want to validate all the data that we have and ensure that you get the right kind of, information and insights to get your launch right. So
Thank you.
Again, with IQVIA, we were surprised, even they tried, but they were more focused on commercial data, and Jonathan was one of the members with the launch excellence team, just to let you know. So, but they don't have a platform yet.
Yeah, they don't have a platform. The benefit of IQVIA was that they could use the data they have, and they have a lot of data, and so
Yes.
they were able to kind of cherry pick from different trackers to say, okay, here's the evidence here, here's the evidence there. But it was a long way from, as it were, consulting groups, so the Accentures of this world, who have all the kind of experience in terms of management consulting and how to kind of bring together a kind of a particular approach across disparate teams. And what I think that with ConformanceX is that it sits somewhere in the middle. It's got the data and the kind of the engine, the platform, which is key, but it also has the kind of the more strategic area as well. So it fits somewhere in the middle, and it's quite different to the way that commercial excellence groups within different pharmaceutical companies would structure their go-to-market kind of approaches as well. So there are different ways of trying to support pharmaceutical companies moving forward, but they come at them all as from a different angle.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for your kind of clarification.
If I may build
Sure.
upon what Jonathan is saying, I think what the beauty that I saw on this, I mentioned already the benchmarking and the modeling of solutions. And I think that would be a significant competitive differentiator for your platform. Not only on the templates that you mentioned already, the TA specific templates that will come from the analysis on the predecessors, but also your ability to tailor it to whichever resources the given client has in that moment. I am aligned with Jonathan on my bias that a launch leader would be someone from the business side, because it's my bias, I am from the business side.
Yes.
But this is not the reality for every single startup or even for a well-established mid-sized, mid-cap biotech, right? So the ability not only to tailor to the molecule, but to tailor to the company resources, financial and human resources. It is the boutique element that I would go for as a competitive differentiator.
Thank you, Christiana. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thank you for adding that. Any other questions, Aina, Suzanne?
Or some guidance.
Yes, please. That was a good point.
See, Abhijit, we are sitting in front of
All my questions
experts.
were already asked.
That's good. Aina, if you have anything to ask or if I could clarify.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing. Learned a lot today and really great concept. I think my major question was basically about who is going to be, what other group of folks who will be a champion of the product, because like that's kind of like what needed for early success. So already answered. Definitely see a lot of need as in the market for this kind of tool and system that allows folks to collaborate while have data driven but human driven expert combination of where expertise and data getting balance and complement each other both across the types of information but also across the types of functions. So yeah, no questions right now, but great to learn about it. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Just to summarize, there were 2 points which were mentioned. One was by Christiana, and which is visibility. And you mentioned about the process flow. And Sudeep mentioned about inefficiencies when it comes to collaboration and others. So kind of wrote down those points. One thing came across all kind of companies. You'll be surprised to know that the leadership don't have visibility of what's happening across countries. The leadership don't know. So we have built our model based on hierarchy. A leader could have a visibility of across functions, by function, by country, whereas a person who is executing from a small functional role or a task only gets to see what he has to see and responds to his core group. So we could also kind of embed external partners into the platform to ensure that the data is all in one place so that you could see the whole journey end to end. So we try to address those not only through notification collaboration. We have a client success team as well who will be aiding getting the data in if someone is not responding. So we kind of really spend time trying to address all this. And there are frameworks, we have created frameworks to kind of address. Thank you.
Wow, this has been pretty enriching, right? Very enlightening. And I'm sure for everybody, right? No, this is really fantastic. I think we should do more of these kind of thought leadership panels every now and then. I would love to get connected with all the panelists and audience in one-on-one manner and probably learn more from their feedback, from their guidance and so on and so forth. I think we could have kept, going on with this for hours and hours without feeling need to stop, but we have to stop. But yeah, really, really appreciate everybody's time today. It has been really amazing discussion, and thanks for your feedback, your guidance to Abhijit and Ankitash. I'm sure we will, become even a better company with the feedback and guidance that we received today. So again, appreciate everybody's time today and insights, and let's reconnect soon in the next few weeks. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Casey. Rajat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Good night.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.